Hi, I'm Mark Lawson, President of Morningstar Music Publishers. Today we are joined by Michael Burkhardt to discuss ways that the organ can be used creatively in online worship services. So, Michael, thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
Before we begin, let's talk a moment about the unique situation that many people are finding themselves in. I've been watching a number of online services, like probably many of us have. One of the things that really sticks out to me is how the musicians are playing such an important role in the service. When you remove the congregation from the equation, the service changes dramatically. And I think people are finding that there may be a shortage of resources for them to continue to do the online services in the way that they want to. Michael, have you noticed, what are some of your observations about what you've seen?
I think I've seen the online worship run the whole gamut of very traditional, very formal to rather folksy, with neither one of them being better than the other. But I think as a general observation, I see people struggling with how do we become relational with the people who aren't in the room with us as we are either recording ahead of time or live streaming the worship experience of the day for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think there are more resources out there than people actually realize to help with this. But publisher websites are not necessarily set up to funnel people to these kinds of resources easily. So I think that that's part of the reason we're doing this today. So with that short introduction, I'm going to turn this over to you, Michael, and I'll monitor the chat for questions. And I'll come back at the end and we'll look at some of those questions. Let me just add quickly that there are two resource lists that you might find helpful. You can find them linked in the YouTube description, or you can find them on our website when you click the link to this session. They are linked under featured resources. So with that, Michael, please take it away.
Well, it's great to be with you. I don't pretend to have all of the answers. Perhaps some suggestions based on my own experience and the experiences of others that I've had the privilege to work with or watch in action. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation to share some ideas with you. And for today, regarding creative use of the organ in online worship, I'm going to focus on the whole idea of congregational song in relationship with people. So I'm going to take us back just very briefly to ask, what is our calling in all of life, not just in this particular time of life? And I really believe that we are all called to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And that each of us are summoned to a particular task in a particular place at a particular time, knowing that our summons may change throughout our lifetime and take us in new directions in unexpected ways. And I don't know of a time where that is more true, taking us in new directions in unexpected ways. Maybe a greater question to ask ourselves is, what is our summons? As church musicians, I believe we're summoned to inspire, lead, and support and encourage the faith community as it sings its songs, whether they're gathered in the same place or watching from their homes or another place. We're also summoned to bring the text and music of hymns and liturgy to life in this faith community, so that the song of the faith community can be a living voice of the gospel. We get that from one of our roots of Martin Luther. And so the big question I think we're looking at today is, how do we go about this summons that we've been given as church musicians? Well, I believe we must sit in humility before all works of art, including those treasures of communal song, so that we might fully receive the treasures, connect with them, and share them with the people we are summoned to lead. There's a wonderful quote by C.S. Lewis that I'm reminded of, and he says this: "The first demand of any work of art makes upon us is to surrender. Look, listen, and receive." I'm thinking in lots of my life experiences, and perhaps yours also, that we don't take the time always to look, listen, and receive. We may look, but we may listen with prejudice or ears that are not ready to hear. And rather than receiving, we make a judgment. So it's just a way to think about what you've been asked or summoned to do as a church musician, particularly during this time of the pandemic. So I would like to take us on a series of journeys today with 5 hymn experiences. We have an early English piece, "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," followed by a Welsh hymn tune, followed by a German chorale, followed by an early American piece, and followed by a global piece from Central America. I chose these 5 hymns for our experience because I think they can be useful to us during this fall season. Several of them fit festivals that we observe during the fall, and others could be used throughout the season, either in a general or a praise way. So our first hymn we're going to take a look at today is "O God, Our Help in Ages Past." Some might say, "Oh, I've done it 100 times. I know how it goes. I'll do it like this." But maybe we can't do it that way now that we are working and sharing liturgy and worship in a new way, basically with an online format. So I'm going to ask you to visualize a little bit for our first journey, the notion that it's all about time. We think about time day and night. We set our alarms to make sure we're not late. We mark our calendars, and we use watches to make sure we know where we are and starting on time and ending on time.
And Michael, I want to make sure your screen is sharing.
Is it not sharing?
It's not sharing at this point. So
I'm so sorry about that. This is where it was supposed to start. I will see what I can do. Excuse me 1 second, friends. I'm going to do this again. Has it come up now?
yes, it looks good.
Okay. Well, perfect timing. Thank you for sharing that, Mark, with me. So in this first hymn, it really is all about time. And it just, as I mentioned earlier, day and night, and how we mark the periods of the day and night with different devices to keep track of time. But it's all about time in a different way. We mark the beginning of life, the middle of our lives, and as we get older, that part of our lives. It's also about times in our lives, times where we might be rejoicing, times where we might be lamenting or sad, other times where we're just outrageously disgusted or angry with the world, or maybe just speechless and not having anything to say. Maybe, I hope these images might conjure up a way for us to reconsider the hymn, "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," based on Psalm 90, and how God views time and our time on this earth. So what I've put together for us today to experience is a plan based on 2 resources. One of them is the resource of a partita on the hymn tune Saint Anne by Paul Mons, and the other a festive hymn setting, "O God, Our Help in Ages Past." And I think that many of us might already have resources in our libraries that we can use during this time, but maybe we have to think outside of the box how we might combine them in an energetic and creative way for our online worship participants. So I think also as we look at these resources, it gives us an opportunity to return to our roots on the use of the organ in worship. Taking us all the way back to the alternatum practice of the Reformation era, also intonation practices prior to that, and the whole notion of some kind of improvisation or spontaneity, the spark that enlivens our communal time of singing and proclaiming the word together. So I created a plan based on these two resources. You can see it on your screen right now, using the theme from Paul Mons's Partita as our introduction, followed by, in today's example, a cantor singing the tune with music from the festive hymn setting to accompany the cantor. When we get to stanza 2, just an idea for you. Sometimes we can just play right out of the hymnal, but maybe revoice the SATB parts of the hymnal so that it creates a little descant or some new moving material above the melody. Our third stanza is also from Paul Mons's Partita. It's the Adagio. It's an ornamented cantus firmus. And as we're looking at that text, we're also looking at how our past and is there. There's a foundation being laid. And the whole notion of using an ornamented cantus firmus also harkens to the past. When we get to stanza 4, it's all about time, and I don't know if you have trouble envisioning this, I do. 1,000 ages in God's sight are like an evening gone. Can't imagine it, but what an incredible God we have. The fifth stanza likens time to an ever-rolling stream, and I hope you will hear that stream in the organ part. Finally, we recap all of those stanzas about time with confidence in the hope that God will continue to lead us and guide us to our journey's end. We take time now to listen to one experience of journey. It's all about time. Yes, all about time. That's going to take us to another journey with the Welsh hymn, Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise. And as we're looking at this one, maybe our journey will take us to the notion of meeting. And as I'm looking at this text, we really truly are meeting the God of all creation. Look at all of those descriptive words and titles just from a couple of stanzas of the text. Immortal, invisible, all-wise God, most blessed, most glorious, ancient of days, almighty, victorious, giver of life, unchangeable. Just putting that into our minds and into our hearts may give us direction on how we want to lead this hymn with our online worshipers. In addition, it might be an opportunity to meet colors that help us to realize the grandness and the wideness of the mystery of God. And it might be an opportunity for us to show off the colors of the organ as we share this hymn with our online worshipers and invite them to sing along. In this case, we might be looking at a small reed ensemble or a consort-like experience, followed by strings and flute ensemble, and then a large reed ensemble, and capping it off with principal brilliance and a piccolo sound. All of that being said, that as we do any of these hymn journeys, I think the most important thing that we can do is invite people into the experience. I know that in some of our more formal traditions and even less formal traditions, we would simply say, we will now sing hymn such and such, maybe give the title. Please stand to sing if we're in person, or please open your hymn books or your bulletin to such and such a page. That doesn't really work for our online worshipers, and it doesn't bring people into relationship. And so I think we need to talk about or somehow find a way to introduce a hymn, at least one of the hymns in our online worship experiences, that engages the imagination as well as the spirit of the worshiper. And so maybe just saying we're now going to sing such a hymn is not the answer. But perhaps, as in the previous hymn, it might be to actually use the words, we're going to sing all about time. Not the way we imagine time. And if you want, put some of those ways we measure time as part of your presentation and engagement with your worshipers. But we're going to think about time in God's eyes, and then invite them into the experience, perhaps saying, oh, you are going to be invited to sing along with our cantor today on stanzas 1, 2, 4, and 6. But then you're going to have a chance to reflect upon the words of stanzas 3 and 5. So that can be true for any of the hymns. I certainly wouldn't do it for all of them, but you want to establish some kind of journey relationship with all of your worshipers. So as we're in the second journey, we're going to take a look at Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise, using two very different resources. One of them is a set of resources called Easy Hymn Settings. They were really written for organ students, but we have found that lots of people use them as their hymn introductions and at times their hymn accompaniments or free harmonizations for congregational song. So our plan for this particular hymn is not to have a long introduction, but just the final phrase of the hymn, and then use the Easy Hymn Settings for the first 3 stanzas, followed by a dance-like stanza. And in this case, again, people would be asked to reflect and meditate on the words for stanzas 2 and 4. And perhaps since they're in the privacy of their home, they might be even encouraged to dance or do some kind of movement during stanzas for Celtic celebration of that praise text. Here are the 4 stanzas of Immortal Invisible. Thank you for meeting an incredible God and the colors of the instrument. We're going to move to the time of Reformation and one of the great hymns of that period, Lord, Keep Us Steadfast in Your Word, text by Martin Luther. And it's really helpful for us to know context of hymns in addition to their spiritual and theological meanings. And the context for this particular hymn has actually quite profound spiritual meaning, but it also was a prayer for protection from enemies of the country at the time. And so as we take a look at these words, we can think about them in terms of our spiritual well-being and for guidance in that, but also for protection in the world. So our journey is going to take us to the whole notion of prayer. And sometimes our prayers are quite simple. And in this case, we have a simple one, that we would remain steadfast and that God would protect us. We hear that in stanza 1 of this hymn. But then a total change of character, asking God to show God's power and defend us from all danger and evil in the world. And finally, a quiet prayer for peace and unity. as I'm thinking about this, we thought they were really important for Martin Luther's day, but perhaps our prayer is exactly the same today, given the situation of our world. And so as we go forward, this also might be considered a study or a journey in contrast, because not all prayers are the same. Sometimes we have those quiet, whispered prayers. Sometimes we have those prayers yelled out of anger. Sometimes we have those prayers that are cried with tears. And so as we take a look at the 3 stanzas of this hymn, we're going to start in a very simple way for that prayer for protection and steadfastness, and hearken back to the origins of this hymn tune, which are really a Latin chant. For stanza 2, we read about the power of Jesus Christ, and we ask that Jesus would defend us and bring us to life eternal to sing triumphantly. A total change of sentiment and prayer. And finally, that 3rd stanza, which begins, "O Comforter of priceless worth, send peace and unity on earth." I'm not always a big advocate of great contrast from one stanza to the next, because sometimes I think it fools our congregation when they should sing with us and when they should just listen. But in this case, I think I would explain it and say, today's prayer takes on many forms. We're going to sing with the cantor, a quiet prayer at the beginning, and a very reflective prayer at the end. Lord, keep us steadfast in your word.
Lord,
from that prayer time, possibly for use on Reformation Sunday, we move to All Saints Sunday, to the early American hymn, Jerusalem, My Happy Home. All about maybe a dream or a dreamer of wondering when we will come to this perfect life that is blessed, both in terms of its gardens and all of creation, and where all grief and all sorrow and all care is gone. So perhaps this journey might be called one of longing and anticipation. For this journey, going to use two different resources, and rather than just have the organ interpret a particular stanza of text, we would invite perhaps our congregation to sing with the cantor on stanzas 1, 2, 4, and 5, but perhaps the cantor might sing along with something that was originally an organ voluntary. Looking for stanza 3 to use the second movement of Gerald Near's Suite for Organ. It's called Sarabande, and it is based on the hymn tune Land of Rest. And it makes a beautiful, beautiful solo, as well as a beautiful setting for both a solo singer and for the organ. We start out very simply for this plan, and the interesting thing is, as I'm looking through all of my resources, to find out that even though these two resources were written at very, very different times in each composer's life, that some of the harmonic progressions are the same between them. Curious, I don't know how it happened, but it's nice to find those kinds of little jewels when they do happen. I hope you hear some of the harmonic unity that occurs between the two different settings. And sometimes we might just do something very simple, as in stanza 4, add a canonic voice and a pedal point to the first group of singer, or the soloist that is singing. So let's listen to this dream for our eternal life or a new world. And sometimes there will just be a time where we need to leave the organ and go to some other keyboard instrument and perhaps other instruments, period. We visit a piece that translates as "The Lord now sends us forth" from Central America. And perhaps some of our congregation will know the Spanish to this to sing along. But even if they don't, we can invite them to participate, whether they're an online worshiper or eventually a socially distant worshiper in the worship space itself. And so we're going to call this journey "Move It," because that's what the text is all about. The Lord now sends us forth with hands to serve in the world. And this is not left up to the angels, but it is our task and our summons in the world. So to move it, we've got all of these body parts: heads, hands, feet, torsos. We might find a way to involve them in the singing and offering up of this hymn. One of the ways in which we might use those feet and hands are by assigning the different instrumental accompaniments that are indigenous to this particular folk idiom to the bodies. And perhaps we could use patting of thighs, clapping, snapping, rubbing our hands together, stomping our feet to create some of these rhythm patterns. And we might simply take time as part of our online worship to say, okay, I don't know who's out there, but I'm going to invite some of you to keep the beat this way, or some of you to clap this rhythm, some of you to tap this one. And if you're not comfortable doing that, you can always get up and move around the way the music invites your body to do so. The resource for this is not an organ resource, but it is a choral octavo. And we listen to it now with a choir singing it, but with an instrumental consort of a different flavor accompanying it and leading the congregation's song. Invite you in your seats now as a webinar participant, maybe to pick some rhythms that you find recurring in this particular piece, to clap them, tap them, or even dance them in your own personal space. quickly a prayer for this journey of leading God's people in song, albeit in a new way. Comes from Ken Geyer's book, Windows of the Soul. Help me, O God, to have the humility to sit at the feet of great arts and congregational song and everything in life, whether it is a painting or a person on the street, a scene from a movie or a score from a musical, a sunset or a psalm, and to look and to listen and to receive what is being offered there.
Great. Wonderful, Michael. Thank you for sharing so much. I have a couple of questions that have come up. One was from Nancy. She says, she loves your work and play it often. Have you found a need to adjust the volume or registration or playing style that when you're playing hymns for online worship?
Great question. Where we recorded the particular examples for today were done in a cathedral-like setting where the soloist was 25 feet away from me and the pipes were at least 100 feet away. And so a coordination effort there. And if I'm just working with a soloist, I try to find colors on the organ that will fit the color of the soloist's voice, but not to drown them out. And in a couple instances for this particular sharing, we simply moved the soloist closer to the mic when I wanted to use the full organ sound. And we had a little bit of an advantage because the organ was way up in the rear gallery. So it could be a little bit more distant than the immediacy of the soloist.
Okay. Yeah, and let me say something about that as well. I've had several conversations with people about some of this, and one of the things that our recording engineer has said is that when you're in an online worship, it's more like a broadcast and more like a recording than it is sound reinforcement. And so you really need to get a pair of headphones on to experiment to see how it sounds as a broadcast rather than necessarily how it sounds in the room. And when you do a lot of recording, that's what you learn very quickly, is that the sound in the room can be deceiving, and from what it sounds like when it's broadcast over microphones. So you have to work with that just a little bit and experiment as well. So that kind of leads into the next question from Carl Roby, who says, what are some of the ways that you deal with sound quality issues, like sound quality over the internet and radio? Because that has been a major issue for him.
I have to say, I'm not the person to ask about that. I'm the person who creates the stuff, and I depend on a technician to do it for me. But I do know that that whatever you do, the hardest thing is to coordinate it. And different people have different ways of coordinating people's efforts, particularly when they're recording from their homes and splicing things together. I think the best thing that I can say is use, for me personally, not the technician, is use your ears. And if it doesn't feel good to you when you are doing it or listening to it, it's probably not going to feel good to someone else. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but that's the best I can give.
I do think there has to be some investment in equipment when you do this. I know a lot of churches who started out being very cheap with what kind of equipment that they had and realized this is here to stay for a while. And so you have to do some investment to make sure that it's quality in what you're doing, I think. So
I think,
go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, as far as a good person to talk to is one of your people at Morningstar, who was very helpful to me with the technological things, Kevin Uppercue. He's kind of running the show today. So you might direct questions to him. What I found very useful is a Zoom 4 and Pro microphone for the recording and then downloading the WAV files from it.
Okay. Another question is, someone's asking, they have very interesting ideas, and are you preparing music for Zoom worship or pre-recorded live worship? Or, is it pre-recorded or live? Do you have a difference?
I would do for pre-recorded worship because it takes more time than I can do, for a live stream, particularly because I would want to add some visuals to it, like from the PowerPoint, to help engage people in it. I think when you're doing live streamed worship, depending on where you are doing it from, you really need then more technical prowess and equipment set up, so that if you are going to invite them as the musician into congregational song, and if you are leading it from the organ or a loft, you need to have a good microphone there, to invite them in. And somehow, maybe in your live stream, different people have done it different ways, but some churches do a bulletin that goes underneath, the live stream presentation. And if you click on a button, it turns the page for you along the way. So I think each one has its pros and cons. The pro of pre-recording allows you to fix things, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes we get caught up in the perfection rather than the spirit of it.
Right. And I think one thing I wanted to quickly ask about is so much of what you're doing, every one of these examples, depended a great deal on the congregation understanding and following the text. And so I think the importance of providing the text in some way for them to engage with is important, whether it be on the screen or whether it be printed. Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think it's good to present it in a variety of ways. Sometimes I think if you're asking them to reflect on the text, get the music out of there and just print the text.
Print the text.
And if it's helpful, put some visuals around it, or put a background around it that maybe captures the spirit or the affect of the text. But when you want them to sing, put the tune minimally with the text you want them to sing. I learned from my mother when she said, I hate it when they just print the words. I can't read music, but I know if it goes up or down. And we want people we don't want to cheat them out of the experience. We want to give them all the help we can.
Right. So I think we're going to close it here. Let me make a couple of little suggestions for if you're looking for material. One easy way is using our website almost as a planning resource. So many of you already own a great number of our publications, and many of these that were actually examined. So sometimes I just simply go into the search function and put the tune name in, so that I see every publication that comes up that is based on that tune. And then you can see if there's an accompaniment, you can see if there's a choral arrangement, you can see all kinds of samples, and it can maybe spark ideas. And many of Michael's things, you can also search Michael Burkhardt and then search by tune. And there's all kinds of ways you can use the website to find different resources. So, Michael, thank you so very much for being with us. Looks like you wanted to add one more thing.
I just want to say, and don't just rely on other people. Trust yourself sometime. You know your people better than I do, than Mark does. And sometimes you might have the answer and creativity within yourself to share with your congregation. Go for it, and blessings on all of your endeavors during this time.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you for all of you for joining us. Have a good day.
Bye.